What's going on, everybody? Welcome into Bills Chat Live on a Victory Friday, as the Buffalo Bills already have a game in the books this week, a 24-18 victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to improve to 5-3 on the season. With me tonight from the other side of the world is Luka. Luka, how are you doing tonight, this morning? How are you doing?
I guess it technically would be this morning, but I'm doing good. I got a little cat nap in prior to this show and everything like that. Kind of got my notes, did my things with Lucas Locks, all that. Apologize for any noise, of course, based on the situation I got at hand. But doing good and everything like that. And it did not affect me from being all the way over here and watching the game last night or last morning, however you want to say it for over here. I was able to watch every minute, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, we will work through some of the Lucas sound issues. We just appreciate you making time for us, since it is now the wee hours of the morning for you. I will try to mute you and unmute you because I know you don't have that functionality on your end. But Luka, we're going to start this show like we do most Bills Chat post-game shows. And we are going to follow the post-game format. If you are familiar with our Bills Chat pod post-game, we do how did the game make you feel? And then we talk about game balls, game checks. It's going to be that format since the game was yesterday. But Luka, as we normally start our post-game shows, when that Hail Mary dropped to the ground and it was obvious that Chris Godwin had no idea the ball was landing 2 feet from him and the Bills get the game to the win column, what is going through your mind?
I don't even know how to describe it. Just thank God it's over. Thank God the game is over. I was ready to go to bed first and foremost. And then secondly, I was just like, thank God it's over. Thank God what we experienced the drive prior for the Buccaneers did not just amplify itself for the following drive, being that Hail Mary and kind of putting a cherry on top of disaster. And at the end of the day, the win was secured and everything was good.
It was one of those weird games where it felt like for the entire game, the Bills were in control. And if you were going to make a list of things you wanted to see from the Bills, especially offensively in this game, they would have checked every box. I went on a rant in my post-game show, the solo show last week, about how they need to speed it up. Tempo, tempo, tempo. I want to see them not sub guys out every play. I want to see stick to a package of players and just run with that. And the Bills did that first drive of the game. They come out Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs, Khalil, Shakir, Dalton Kincaid at traditional tight end, and Latavius Murray, and they went right down the field on the Bucs to get that first field goal. And they were throwing. We saw some design Josh Allen runs in there. It was a primarily 11 personnel game, somewhat forced by the fact that Dawson Knox and Quentin Morris were out of this game. And it really was like such a nice watch until the end of the fourth quarter is getting there. And you're like, wait a minute, the Bucs are still in this game. And yeah, they're down by 2 touchdowns and there's 9 minutes to go. And they're going to randomly take 7 minutes off of the clock en route to scoring one of the flukiest touchdowns you'll ever see in your life. But when they get that and then the fluky 2-point conversion and they're down by 6, you're thinking, oh my God, there is just no chance these hard luck Bills are going to blow this game. And ultimately, they did not. Luka, was there a point in this game where you were worried about the Bills losing?
Yeah. I mean, essentially, once the 2-pointer that went off of Jordan Phillips' helmet to then end up in the security of whoever the receiver was on that play. I don't know if it was Kate Otten or whoever. When that 2-point conversion happened, Josh, that's when officially I went on notice. And I was like, okay, if fluky things like that, if 2 fourth down stops that are then overturned based on penalty, then lead them down the field to a touchdown, which then you see a fluky 2-point that also occurs. Obviously, the Mike Evans touchdown itself was fluky, being that it came off of Christian Benford's helmet. That's when you think the universe is starting to be against you and things are just not going to work out for you. And luckily, obviously, we know how it all finished. But when the 2-point conversion happened, that's when I officially was on kind of alert, because there seemed to be other forces affecting the whole situation.
So I never got worried until one moment, and I will tell you guys a quick story. I never felt like the Bucs were a threat to score on the defense, and I know they went down late in the game. I was okay with every punt the Bills did, and we can talk about that here in a little bit. I felt like the way this game was going, the Bucs had shown no ability to drive down the field. And when you look at their touchdown they got to get it within one score, they needed Jordan Phillips, who is at least twice as big as Baker Mayfield, to randomly grab his face mask when the play is all but over on fourth down to extend the drive. They needed a illegal contact penalty on Taron Johnson to extend a drive. The touchdown pass bounced off of Christian Benford's helmet. And then Luka already alluded to the 2-point conversion that was batted 10 feet up in the air and landed randomly in the arms of Cade Otton, which we had already seen a Josh Allen interception bounce 10 feet up in the air off the hands of Antoine Winfield, landing in the lap of a Tampa Bay Buccaneers defensive lineman. And my thought was, okay, none of this is sustainable. It stinks that they're within 6, but none of this is sustainable. The point I got nervous, they were lining up for the Hail Mary. And we all know this game's on Amazon Prime. So there's like, I think we're all at different spots of the game, give or take a few seconds. And right before they snapped the ball, I looked down at my phone and there's a text message from James Stokes that says, all caps, bruh, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. And I went from relax, this is going to be your classic Hail Mary, heart sinking, sweat coming out, heart attack ready to go, thinking, what am I about to see? And then the ball obviously hits the ground. I go check the text message and Stokes was like, have you ever, why was Chris Godwin not looking for the ball or something like that? I'm like, Stokes, I didn't see that part of your text message. The last time I got a bruh text message, all caps from Stokes, was right before the block punt with Pittsburgh 2 years ago on opening day. So I am triggered there. But all in all, I know there's some angst out there about the Bills don't put teams away. And I understand that sentiment. But I will tell you, Luka, I had no issue with the Bills punting in any of those situations. I thought Sam Martin was having his best game maybe in his career. I thought the Bills should have downed the ball down at the 1 yard line on the final punt of the game if Saran Neal could have gotten the ball caught. And I had no issue with them trusting their defense in that spot because the way the Buccaneers offense had looked, I thought they were going to need the Bills to help them, and turning the ball over at the 40 instead of making them go 90 yards was a way to help them. So I had no issue with it. You and I tend to be more on the aggressive side, more on the go for it side. Hey, you have Josh Allen, use them. What were your thoughts on the various punts in the fourth quarter?
So the first one, I'm okay with the situation. The Tampa Bay is just not moving the ball. And even the second one, I can understand, and you can tell me why it makes sense. I think Tampa at that point, total yardage was still under 200 yards on the day, and that's or on the night. My brain, though, just can't get over that is a moment of which you can truthfully put the game away with the control of an offense that seems to be moving okay. Like, they obviously got into situations where they're in back-to-back 4th and 2s at the exact same spot of the field. And that's, it's just stalling out. Tampa Bay starting to kind of get their punch back to the situation because they were losing it a little bit there. And I would like to see kind of Buffalo that second time around, maybe just be like, no, we're the top dog in this game. We're the alpha. We're going to do this. But overall, I'm not going to sit there and be upset about it and be like, this is why we got to the point. Sam Martin's punting really well. The defense is holding its own up until that point. Like I mentioned, under 200 yards total on the day. At that point, when Sam Martin punts that second time on 4th and 2, you feel comfortable that you should still be able to put the game away. And all in all, if it wasn't for those 4th down kind of fluky situations with a couple penalties there, it would have been fine and this wouldn't be a discussion. It took that plus other things to make it a discussion. And to me, that's where it's like, hey, I like being aggressive. That is where I always will live, and I would prefer them to do that. But I'm not going to argue against any individual that thinks punting made sense on the night because there's a lot of stats that back that up.
Let's talk about the offensive approach in this game because we saw the Bills go to more 11 personnel. And again, I mentioned that somewhat by default because Dawson Knox and Quentin Morris were out. The backup tight end on this night was Reggie Gilliam, and the third string tight end was David Edwards. But what we saw from the Bills was we have seen nights before where Josh Allen will throw the ball and 8 different receivers will be involved. But by involved, I mean 8 different receivers will catch one pass, and Diggs has 10 catches. And it's like, wow, the Bills really spread it around. Well, not really. Like, they had one dump off to Reggie Gilliam. Diggs had 10 catches. And then it's like Gabe Davis 2, Dawson Knox 1. What we saw against the Bucs was the true definition of spreading it around. You had 4 receivers with at least 5 catches. All of those guys had at least 65 yards. And those 4 receivers were Gabe Davis, 9 for 87 and a touchdown, Stephon Diggs, 9 for 70, Khalil Shakir, 6 for 92, and Dalton Kincaid, 5 for 65. And I do want to have a conversation about the 3 non-Diggs receivers there individually. And let's start with Dalton Kincaid, Luka, because I think what he proved last night with his snap count, where he had 48 snaps, and every time that the Bills passed, he ran a pass route. He didn't pass block one time, but he also lined up in line on 30 of his snaps, and PFF gave him a positive run blocking grade for whatever you think that's worth. I will tell you something that we noticed in training camp, we noticed in preseason games, we noticed watching him back in college. I like Dawson Knox. I think Dawson Knox is kind of right now getting maybe a little bit of the Tremaine Edmonds treatment, where we need somebody to blame. So let's blame the tight end that's playing with a bad hand. I think Dawson Knox is still a very useful player. All of that said, everything just comes so much more naturally to Dalton Kincaid. The smoothness of which he runs his routes. The word smooth just comes to mind every single time. And what I love most about Kincaid is, we mentioned a couple weeks ago that ball that Dawson Knox dropped, and it was against the Giants that actually, it could have been a bad throw by Josh Allen, but we like, you want to see your tight end make that play. Mark Andrews, George Kittle, Travis Kelce, they all make that play. There were a couple of balls last night to Dalton Kincaid where Josh Allen, Kincaid's on the run. Josh Allen puts it behind him. Kincaid snatches back and catches it. The touchdown run, Kincaid had to extend for it. The one on the sideline where he reaches up and gets 2 feet down. He has an insane ability to catch the ball. He has unbelievable smoothness in his routes and an unbelievable awareness for a rookie to understand how to get open against zone and a feel for how to get open against man. I don't want to go too far after one game, although it has been 2 good games. But Luka, everything I have seen from Dalton Kincaid to this point makes me want to see the Bills continue to push him, even when Knox comes back. And with the success they had with 11 personnel, I'm not overly excited to see them go back to 12 personnel when Knox comes back. They can keep that in their gun as like a weapon, but I like the idea of having Kincaid and Shakir, who we'll talk about in a bit, out there with Diggs and Davis. I think it makes them way more multiple. And right now, I have a hard time finding a reason to give Knox more snaps than Kincaid when he's healthy.
I need you to unmute me. There we go. The interesting part with Kincaid to me is, after that game we saw, honestly, my favorite catch outside of the obvious, which is that sideline, just bringing your toe tap down, essentially. Great body control. Something you rarely see out of a tight end was actually that over the middle. You referenced it, where he's reaching behind himself to then continue over the middle and pick up that first down. It's just a great understanding of how to utilize the catch radius you present for your quarterback while also maintaining balance and control on the field of play to maximize whatever that run after catch opportunity is, so on and so forth. And I think it's just very, very smooth. As you mentioned, smooth is the perfect description for Kincaid. And it's like Dawson Knox is kind of your Honda CRV. It's functional, it gets by, things like that. But this is an Escalade that can even be better. This is something that can really elevate at that position, where it's like, yeah, it's got the flash, it's got the pizzazz, it understands what it needs to do, and it's an incredible weapon that you would like to see them continue with in what we saw in this kind of old but new look offense in the 11 personnel and everything they did there. It's just, Kincaid just opens up a lot of avenues of success outside of Diggs and the other things that we know this offense has had in the past to find ways to succeed.
And the next guy I want to talk about is Khalil Shakir. He had 45 snaps, 65% snap share, when in comparison, Trent Sherfield had 22 snaps. Deontay Hardy only had 6 snaps. So I think we're starting to see a lean toward Khalil Shakir as that primary third wide receiver. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One, we heard all about how good Trent Sherfield was as a run blocker, and that holds true. But Khalil Shakir has quietly developed into maybe the best run blocking wide receiver on this team. And that includes Gabe Davis and Trent Sherfield, who are both very good at it. That's how far he has come along. by run blocking, by earning those reps in the offense for his ability to run block. He has earned reps in the passing game and taken advantage of them. His stat line last night against those Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 6 catches for 92 yards. And for me, Luka, yeah, there was the play downfield where Josh Allen extends the play, finds a wide open Shakir. That's the one that ate up a lot of the yards. And that's a play you expect any receiver to make. You would expect Sherfield and Hardy to make. But the play that I love is the one on the first drive where Josh Allen rolls out, dumps it out to the flat to Shakir. He could have just gone down for a 5-yard gain, and that would have been fine. But he puts his shoulder down, runs over a defender, toe taps the sideline, gets an extra 10, 15 yards on that play, and the entire sideline goes nuts. And to me, that just showed a confidence level I have not seen from Khalil Shakir to this point. We know he was a good player in college. It felt like last night, to put it as simply as possible, maybe Khalil Shakir found his NFL mojo last night. And I think there is a very realistic chance, Luka, that we look back on this game as the coming out party for a player that over the next couple of years becomes a very important piece of this offense.
I think you brought up a great point about it, or kind of phrased it right. I think it's one of the first times we've seen Khalil Shakir put together 60 minutes of game film where he looks comfortable at the NFL level. But I also believe that he almost has shown last night that physicality level that he needs to bring to the NFL. He is comfortable in that level of physicality he needs to be. He's comfortable with understanding his job, his role as the slot, wherever he's needed in the offense and whatnot. And he looked extremely, extremely at ease with any opportunity he had in front of him.
And then the next guy I want to talk about is Gabe Davis, because Gabe Davis is a guy that is controversial among Bills fans. Some people will tell you he is a high-end, high-quality wide receiver too in this league, and the Bills may even have 2 wide receiver ones on their hands. Others will tell you he's a human roller coaster. One week it's five targets, 1 catch, 10 yards. The next week it's 10 catches for 180 yards and 4 touchdowns. And it's so inconsistent, but when you add it up at the end of the season, it looks pretty nice. It's like 800 to 900 yards and so forth. And last night was the high end of the roller coaster for Gabe Davis. But Luka, I don't want to oversimplify it by just saying, oh, we got the upside of Gabe Davis, because what we saw last night was something we have not seen in Gabe Davis's skill set. Gabe Davis is a high ADOT receiver. He's an explosive playmaker. There's a lot of Deshaun Jackson to his game. He does not have Deshaun Jackson's speed, but he wins a lot of the same ways Deshaun Jackson did, where if you had Deshaun Jackson on your fantasy team, you'd be frustrated 2 or 3 weeks in a row, and then he would win you a league the next week because he would go for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's similar to what Davis will do. Last night, Davis won in different ways. 9 catches for 87 yards. You saw Josh Allen throw it to him short of the sticks. He made defenders miss, fought for a first down, showed some yak ability that we have not seen from him. I never expect Gabe Davis to become a Cole Beasley, Julian Edelman, Emmanuel Sanders type route runner. That's just not his game. But it seems like at least last night, he was able to attack the field at multiple levels, including the underneath route tree. And if that is something they can tap into with Gabe Davis, this offense becomes all that much more difficult to defend. Now, I saw some folks out there, which happens every time Gabe Davis has a good game. It's like, oh, well, if you project his numbers out for the rest of the season, he's going to have 900 yards and 8 touchdowns. And who wouldn't take that from their wide receiver too? And yes, if you were to wait till every time Gabe Davis has a blow-up game to do that, it's going to look good. But let's see if Gabe Davis can follow up a 9-catch, 80-something yard receiving night with another solid performance against the Bengals, where the Bills are probably going to need all the yards they can get. That's where Gabe Davis needs to continue to grow. It's not that we don't believe he can produce. Can he produce consistently? And Luka, as this schedule gets tougher, the Bills are certainly going to need him to do that. And that's the path for Gabe Davis getting a big payday next March, either by the Buffalo Bills or by some other team.
The one point you brought up early in the point about him running a nice complementary 10 and under route tree, that was very, very noticeable in the game last night. It's nice when you have more tools in your weapon, or more. Yeah, whatever. You understand what I'm saying.
It's late where Luke is at, folks.
You need to have a diverse kind of offering of what you can contribute as a true wide receiver two in this league, so that you can attack different defenses, different teams in different ways, so that you're unpredictable. And I felt like, or I feel like with Gabe Davis, he gets caught in the predictable kind of world when it comes to where he produces, where he succeeds. And last night finally felt like one of those moments where he really was getting you 10 and under, intermediate in the middle, up top, stuff like that. You never saw just the one big streaky play. Next thing you know, he's got 80 yards on the card and a touchdown because it was, supported by a 65-yard go-ahead score, whatever the case may be. So it's just one of those things where you want to see him be a complete receiver. He has what seems like in flashes the ability to be that complete receiver. And last night was one of the best examples of that he could potentially grow upon. And then, as you mentioned, get a payday next offseason.
So a solid all-around night for the offense, but I will say there are still some skeptics out there. One of them is Bills fan 1970 watching on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, we would very much appreciate if you take a moment to like and subscribe, and it helps us out so much as we are trying to build this channel into your one-stop shop for all Buffalo Bills content. And there's some Sabre stuff out there too, so Buffalo sports content. Bills fan 1970 says the numbers say he's in the top half of the league. Situational play calling is holding him back along with the rest of this offense. And, I would respectfully disagree, Bills fan 1970. I don't think that Dorsey is an elite play caller, but I do think he's good. I've made comparisons before. I think Dorsey is like the Kirk Cousins of play callers, where he's not in that elite class, but he's also not as bad as his detractors think he is. I think, and this is going to not be something a lot of people want to hear, I think a lot of the issues the Bills have had the last couple of weeks have been because of the quarterback, not Tampa Bay, but in New England especially. Josh Allen had a very bad game. I thought there were plays there for Josh Allen to make that he just passed up. There were easy throws on the menu for him to take, and he did not take them. There were plays in the running game where he didn't check out of a run where they had no numbers on their side. And I thought that Dorsey, which is going to happen when you have a quarterback who's a fan favorite, it's easy to blame the offensive coordinator. I don't think Josh Allen gave Dorsey much of a chance in New England, but it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. Luka, let's spin it around and talk about the defense, because it's now been 3 weeks since the Bills have been living with this new reality of playing without Daquan Jones and playing without Matt Milano, and they had already lost Tre'Davious White for this season. And we had kind of looked at the schedule and projected and said they may not feel this for a few weeks because they have some really bad offenses coming up. The Giants were a horrendous offense, and the Bills did really well in that game. The Patriots were a horrendous offense, and they had their best game of the season against the Bills. So it was a mixed bag, including a game-winning touchdown where they went right down the field to score. Last night against Tampa Bay, who is kind of a mediocre-ish offense, I thought the Bills' defense looked really good. There was the fluky plays. Both touchdowns, in my opinion, were the result of fluke. The fluke interception that bounced off of Antoine Winfield right up into the air into the lap of a defensive lineman. And then you also had that touchdown drive that was just extended by fluke after fluke after fluke. But what I am curious about now is the Bills are stepping up in weight class, not just this next game against the Cincinnati Bengals, but on the horizon are games against the Philadelphia Eagles, the Kansas City Chiefs, and then we have to also play the LA Chargers. And we know there's another date coming up with the Miami Dolphins along with the Dallas Cowboys. Luka, how confident are you in this current unit of Bills defense? And I know this is a loaded question because we're assuming that, maybe you're not assuming, but we're assuming we're going to get a better version of Von Miller than we have seen to this point. How confident are you that this defense is good enough to keep the Bills in that Super Bowl contender conversation?
I'm not going to assume, first and foremost, that we're going to get a better version of Von Miller. I don't think Von was as useless as I've seen some friends and other people on Twitter say. I just think he's not 100% there as well. But just with this current unit, I think what it was brought up by some with Tampa, and I don't want to use it as kind of a crutch, but they're not a running offense. Like, they just don't find success on the ground as it is as their own unit. So I think that just fed into the hands of the Bills, where if they're just so one-dimensional in the air, if they're a little undersized on the line or whatever it might be, where they might be able to be manhandled in the trenches, just Tampa doesn't have the kind of opportunity to take advantage of that. And where you play the Dallas Cowboys, you play teams such as that, I think you run into big issues with this defense playing against those teams. That being said, I think they can at least hold their own somewhat. It's just the room for error that your offense then has with this current unit is slim to none. You have to make sure you're on your day. You have to make sure you're able to kind of capitalize and be more aggressive. That's kind of, you didn't need it last night, but that's my argument going forward on what I would like to see in those 4th and 2s, Josh. It's like you're going to have to start doing that, even when you're not playing the likes of the Chiefs, which they do have to play coming up. If you're playing the Cowboys, if you're playing the Chargers, who aren't exact, I mean, the Cowboys in some people's minds are juggernauts. I'm still, and we might talk about them a little bit later on the show, Josh, but there are teams that we play this year where it's like, hey, you might not have to be overly aggressive to keep up with their offense, but at the same time, you can't necessarily trust your defense to hold their own time and time again. They might be able to hold off one drive or two, and that's about it. I'm okay with that as long as the offense does their job and at the end of the day kind of puts up the points that they should be able to, like we kind of saw last night.
Roy Collins, one of our favorites, is asking about the trade deadline, if we expect Bean to be active. And we can talk about that here right now, actually, because I will tell you, Roy, after the New England game, I was so concerned about this defense. And I know the offense had a bad day. I get it. But I thought the defense looked extremely leaky. And my biggest concern coming out of that New England game was, holy cow, they have no answer for the loss of Daquan Jones. I thought it was painfully evident that, Luka even knows for his Arizona fandom. We all should know this by now with Jordan Phillips. As big as he is a 3 technique and a 1 technique body. And anytime you ask him to be a 1 technique, you are not only miscasting him as a 1 technique, but you are limiting his upside as a guy that can actually penetrate the pocket in waves as a pass rusher. And he was, for lack of a better term, horrendous against the Patriots. I thought he was a huge part of the reason why the Patriots were able to get so many running lanes against the Bills. He does not stand up well to double teams. I thought last night, hidden in the offensive explosion against the team that Luka already laid out, is not a good running team. So let's take that for what it's worth. I thought Poona Ford reasserted himself as the primary 1 technique on this team, the guy that we thought was the Daquan Jones insurance when they signed him late in the offseason. He was in on, by my count, almost every first down and the majority of second downs. His overall snap count ended up being lesser than, because late in the game when the Bucs went super pass heavy, he was not on the field. But I thought he held up well when I isolated on him on the TV camera. I thought he held up the double teams well. Is he Daquan Jones? Absolutely not. But can he come in and just steady the ship? I think he has that ability. And to Roy Collins' point, you asked me this last week, Roy, I'd say the number 1 need the Bills need is to go out and find somebody to 2 gap and be that 1 technique. I think the way Poona Ford played last night gives the Bills the flexibility to maybe see what they have and not go out there and try to find a defensive tackle. Luka, where are you at with the trade deadline? Do you expect Bean to make a move? And if you had your way, what position would he attack if he was going to make a move?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Ultimately, I think there's maybe moves to be had, but it's going to be difficult. I feel like moves at the deadline are ones where a team really doesn't want to move off of something unless they're absolutely committed to a fire sale, or they are just overwhelmed with the return of which they get. So, like, for instance, everyone keeps targeting the Broncos and what they have to offer. The problem is you have to pay the ransom based on what the Broncos are asking for those guys, whether it's on the offensive or defensive side of the ball. And that's just the reality of the trade deadline. Like, you generally have to pay, assuming that the other 30 teams, obviously because the team that they are currently on is not going to be trading for them, the other 30 teams would be also potentially in the offering for that. And you just have to make that assumption if you're on the far end. So it's just one of those things where I don't know if there's a trade. I would love to technically see a cornerback. That's just always where my head's at. I think there's a little bit of a desire for kind of a true number 1 or just a reliable. I think Benford still does well for his own right. It's just I think there's times where he gets had, and then there's other times where he's the guy we like. You know, if you throw a little bit late, like we saw with Baker last night, Benford can close down and make things happen. But I think if you have a good quarterback against him, he can get got. And then the drop off is from there. We've seen what's going on with Kyrie Elam, or the lack thereof. It's just you don't have really that answer in the secondary, at least out wide on the boundary, that I wouldn't prefer, or I would prefer. Most likely, though, or something I would like to see is maybe just if there is another weapon to just add that something feels like it's just not there for this offense. I commit. Basically, my idea is commit to the offense and just secure another asset that hopefully can allow you to score more points, because like the point prior when you brought up defense and how I felt about that unit, I think they can do okay. It's just, hey, I need the offense to make sure they have less of a chance of having an off day. And if another weapon being brought in, no matter where it is, could potentially do that for them, that to me seems like the better option of the two.
Yeah, and it's important to remember the Bills are working with a pretty limited cap space. But, some of these guys that get mentioned, like DeAndre Hopkins, there was a Devontae Adams day last week. You're talking about trading for somebody mid-season. You're not going to take on the full brunt of their cap hit. So they could actually afford either one of those guys if they were available. There was a Derrick Henry rumor out yesterday that the account that tweeted it out, CJ Golson, is not a reliable account. He's more of a Twitter troll. But I do think that I could see the Bills being interested in something like that. I really could if the price was right. Losing Damian Harris, I think, is a big deal to them. And they've gotten some good run out of Latavius Murray. But, if Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott are able to add a player like Derrick Henry to the mix for a cheap cost. Now, I don't buy into the day 2 pick. I don't think that they would do that. I don't think that the Titans will get that for him. But if the Titans come out and say, hey, we'll give you Derrick Henry for a 4th-round pick because he's on an expiring deal, I could see Brandon Beane having a lot of appeal to that. And that would be something that would not surprise me. Roy asked about concerns about linebacker. I'll tell you, Roy, I'm super pleased with what we're seeing out of Terrell Bernard, both before Matt Milano got hurt and then after Matt Milano got hurt and after Daquan Jones got hurt, who makes every linebacker's job that much easier. I guess I'm disappointed that Dorian Williams got no snaps last night. I get he was horrendous in New England, but I also understand that Tyrell Dodson comes in and in Sean McDermott's mind is going to steady the ship. My thing about what they're doing at linebacker right now is they have kind of gone to that linebacker by committee approach where Tyrell Dodson is in on the early downs. And then we're actually now seeing Jordan Poyer come down and play linebacker in those pass heavy situations with Taylor Rapp going back to safety, which I think is a fantastic use of personnel. You have some depth there. Taylor Rapp's a guy that could start in this league. Why not get him out there and let Poyer play linebacker? All in all, I don't expect the Bills to make a move at linebacker. I really don't. I don't think there's going to be an impact linebacker that can come in and be a huge, huge upgrade over what they have. But what I will say is I don't think I expect the Bills to make a move. And I know that's disappointing. I get the appeal for a weapon, but I feel like they are comfortable with what they have. I get the appeal. Maybe a running back I could see. It wouldn't be my favorite idea, but I could see them doing it. And then as far as cornerback goes, it's not that I don't trust Christian Benford and Dane Jackson, Luka. It's I want the pass rush back we saw the first month of the season. And I know a lot of that went out the window when Daquan Jones left. And maybe Gregory Rousseau is still working through that lower body injury. Maybe Ed Oliver is still working his way back. But I think there is still a path to this being a very dominant defensive line when Von Miller can at least ascend to a little bit better than what he is now. When Gregory Rousseau gets fully healthy, when Ed Oliver gets fully healthy, maybe this mini buy is exactly what they needed. This is the type of defensive line that has a chance to take over games, and in doing so can make cornerbacks' lives that much easier. So when I look at it from the outside looking in, yes, would I like to see the Bills attempt to boost their team? Absolutely. Who wouldn't? But there's nothing out there that makes sense. And to me, if I had to bet today, Luka, I would bet that Brandon Beane stands pat at the trade deadline.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, like it's kind of why I brought up the initial point that I did about the trade deadline. It's just generally the cost is too much, or the deal is just not there to be had. it's one of those things where it's hard to justify bringing in a guy halfway through the season who doesn't understand what's going on, most likely, and you have to ease them in to eventually get them rolling. Next thing you know, what you traded for is really not prepared until, say, late November time. And hopefully whatever you gave up and stuff like that isn't at total risk due to whatever the 4 or 5 games you brought in this individual for. It's just the reality of it. It's kind of like my head always goes to like NHL trade deadline when you bring in a rental guy for a cup run. It's like, look, you generally have to give up. You don't have to do a king's ransom, but you got to give up a good chunk for this guy, and it's really just for that one run. That's really what you're doing. You're doing it for now. It's the one time that you make a move or make a decision for the here and now, realistically, in the entire landscape of the NFL season, because you draft for the future. You generally do free agents, when it comes to a year, 2 years, 3 years, so on and so forth. So it's one of those situations where if the move is there, if it makes sense, do it. If not, and most likely not, they're going to sit back. They're not going to try to force something to make it happen. They're not going to be like, okay, we'll succumb to, 2 firsts, blah, 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 and all this for this one individual to make this run here and there. It just doesn't seem like a beam type of move to me.
All right, Luka, let's put a bow on this game with our favorite weekly segment, Game Balls and Game Checks. If you're new to this post-game format, Game Ball is pretty simple. Luka and I will each hand out a game ball, which is our weekly MVP for the Buffalo Bills. We do not copy each other. If one of us picks one player, the other one goes with somebody else. And same game check is the direct opposite. It's basically the least valuable player. The idea is this player has to give back their game check for their performance against the Buccaneers. Luka, who gets your game ball for the Bills' victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
A lot of good options. So overall, it's like I don't even know which side of the ball to start on. And realistically, I think I'm going to go with the offense. And I'm going to go just with an individual that I think I've been harsh on. I think you've been harsh on. And it was just a breath of fresh air to see them finally step up. And I'm not talking about Kincaid because I don't think we've been harsh on Kincaid, but I'm going to go with Khalil Shakir. Him popping early, him being a reliable target, and really making the most out of a good amount of opportunities. 6 targets, 6 catches, 92 yards. I mean, he was the leading receiver on the team when it comes to yardage output for the night. And he deserves the praise in being kind of finally that thing that others saw and hoped for, and I don't think we were unjustified in being a little hard on him at times and criticizing a little bit, but I think he deserved it overall to get this game ball here from me myself.
That's a good call. There were 2 guys I was going to go with. He was one. Roy Collins says my MVP was Godwin because he didn't turn around in time to catch the Hail Mary. That's a great call, Roy. Boy, this would have been a painful show had he turned around and DeAndre Hopkins thus again. If it's not going to be Shakir, I'm going to go with a guy that I've been very hard on. Gabe Davis, 9 for 87, strong game, but it was the way he won. It was expanding his horizons as a wide receiver, showing he can run the full route tree, showing he can attack and win at all levels of the field, presenting himself early in the down to Josh Allen. And then his touchdown drive was extending the play. We got the full Gabe Davis menu last night. There were no drops, which was great to see. Every Bills receiver, to my eyes, had really good hands last night, and that was obviously nice to see. Another mark on Shakir was the thing about him in camp was he would follow up a really good catch with just a random drop. We did not see the random drop last night. Other guys that would have gotten consideration for me, I thought Josh Allen was spectacular. His one bad play was a tip pass. What are you going to do? 31 for 40, 2 touchdowns, another one on the ground, and he added in 41 yards rushing. I thought James Cook was pretty strong last night, 14 for 67. Dalton Kincaid, you already mentioned, 5 for 65. And I definitely do want to call out Poona Ford, who I think is probably someone that when the Bills go in and watch their all-22 game tape, he's going to get a lot of praise in that defensive line room. Another guy I think had a really strong game, and it's weird to say because a touchdown did go over his head. I thought Christian Benford looked really good last night. I thought there were a lot of plays he made. And I thought he had a big part in slowing down Mike Evans early. Now, look, I don't know if the ball hadn't bounced off of his head, if it just would have landed cleanly in Mike Evans' hands, who knows? But it looked like wrong place, wrong time for all of that. I thought Benford looked pretty well too. Okay, Luka, with the good, we got to have some bad. Oh, the punter. Great call by Paul Joe. The punter had Sam Martin had a fantastic night. Absolutely deserves mention. And then we should mention it too because he's had 2 rough weeks in a row. Tyler Bass was perfect on all of his kicks. I'm looking for the stats now. I don't know how many field goals he had. Maybe just the one. 24. Yeah. So he just had the 1 field goal, 3 extra points, but that was nice to see after a couple struggling weeks for him. Shaq Lawson blocking the field goal was cool. Now, obviously not going to get a game ball for that, but that was good to see. And then Deontay Hardy looked really strong in the return game. All right, Luka, with the good, we got to have some bad. Who gets your game check award for the Bills last night?
I don't know how I decipher through all of those shout outs you just gave. So honestly, to me, the game check award goes to an individual that I know you put out a tweet that you were surprised to see their actual snap count number. I will say this, I was not surprised, but what surprises me is that somehow that individual with that snap count did not even record any statistic on the night. And honestly, it's where my concern starts to finally grow with this individual, and that's Von Miller. I think there's something with it, and he was out there late in the game. If anyone didn't notice, they did finally put him out there in a situation where you're trying to get him to close down and whatnot. And it felt like that Ben's not there. The athleticism that we truly know Von can be at went at obviously 100%. And I don't expect him to be at 100%. It just seems like he's very far off of that. And to me, it brings up a question on, well, just how good is he compared to the other options you have? Can he be that closer guy at this point in time? Maybe you really do need to go with Rousseau and an AJ Epinesa on the edge, which is a crazy thought to have considering what we were probably thinking in the preseason to now. So Von Miller, unfortunately, for the time being, is going to get my game check here because it's concerning to see where he's currently at physically with the decent size snapshot that he had last night.
I'm with you. I am concerned also about Von Miller. I don't know where my confidence level is with him. I can tell you my confidence level is pretty low, so I do know where it is. We shall see. I'll tell you, I thought about Taron Johnson here because last week gave up the game-winning touchdown pass to Gesicki, gave up another touchdown pass this week, had the penalty on defense that extended the drive that gave them the touchdown. But it's just so hard to say with a straight face that Taron Johnson could have not shown up for the game and the Bills would have been just fine. So nothing else would have changed because he offers so much. He did get the quarterback to the ground on one play, and he is so strong in run support, even on games when he doesn't necessarily have it from a coverage standpoint. My game check is going to go to Bills, I guess, starting running back, but that's only because he's out there for the first play. Latavius Murray. 5 carries for 7 yards, added a reception for 4. There was a question about, did James Cook have a reception in this game? He did. He had 1 catch for 6 yards. The running backs were not overly involved in the passing game. I was not a fan, and this is maybe Latavius Murray getting blamed for something that's not his fault. The shotgun run on 3rd and 1 on the goal line that lost a yard, that one wasn't good. There was also a run down at the goal line before that play where I felt like he had a chance to turn the corner and just lacked that speed that you'd like to see a runner do. And it looked like maybe he wasn't supposed to go that way, the way David Edwards was blocking. He wasn't even really trying to keep his defender away from going outside, and he was surprised when the defender went outside to stop Murray. Maybe a miscommunication there. But not Murray's best effort. But I do think there's probably some under the hood stuff he does in pass protection. They still don't trust James Cook there very much, but we shall see. Luka, before we get into your favorite segment, Luka's Locks, I want to play a game with you with the AFC, and I haven't even told you we're going to do this yet. And I want you to stack up where you think the Bills rank in this AFC. Like Shope and Bulldog do their AFC reverse power rankings. I don't think we have to go down and rank Denver or anything like that. But if we were going to rank the top teams in the AFC based on everything we've seen so far, do you think you and I could agree on a top list and figure out where we slot the Bills?
Yeah, I think we could agree on that.
So who would be your number 1 team in the AFC?
Kansas City. The king is the king. And honestly, I'm just going to say this right now. What makes them even more scary is their offense isn't really working out great, and their defense looks – I almost let one slip there – is real.
Their defense is very scary. They've drafted very well. Kansas City, to me, is head and shoulders above – not head and shoulders, but they are clearly the number 1 team in the AFC. Okay, well, who is your number 2 team in the AFC?
My number 2 is Miami. I think Miami is my number 2. just on any given day, they can put up any amount of points they possibly want, and their defense complements very well. If they can come out to a big lead quick and kind of cause panic to the other side, I think that defense sets up very, very well to then just kind of exemplify all the issues you're going to eventually have.
I'm glad you said that, because I think the Bills fan reaction to that is like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I saw our Bills beat the Dolphins 48-20. I've seen the Bills beat the Dolphins basically every meeting for the last 5 years, but 2. And how can you put the Dolphins ahead of the Bills? It's not about head to head. And it's not a transitive property in the NFL. It's not, well, you beat them, so you're ahead of them. It's the body of work. And I will tell you all, if you want to get a little nauseous about winning the AFC East, the Bills still on their schedule, and they have 3 losses already. Add up some of these games: at Cincinnati, at Philadelphia, at Kansas City, at the LA Chargers, at Miami, Dallas Cowboys. Those are 6 very tough games, not to mention rematches against the Jets and the Patriots, who have already beaten the Bills. That's tough. Then when you look at it from Miami's standpoint, the tough games they have left, it's Buffalo and it's Kansas City. Otherwise, you have to hope that the Jets get them once with Zach Wilson. They play the Patriots this weekend in Miami. I'm not holding my breath on that one. So, and they also will play the Dallas Cowboys. After that, the rest of their schedule, it's like Raiders. None of it is challenging. So it's one of those situations where because the fact the Bills finished first in their division, they were playing Jacksonville, they're playing Cincinnati, while Miami gets to get matched up against lesser than teams. I think the Bills are going to have a real tough job catching the Dolphins in this division race because of strength of schedule. And that's okay. That 7 teams get into the tournament from the AFC. So I think the Bills have a good shot at getting one of those spots if it's not through the AFC. So 1-2, Chiefs, Dolphins. Who's your third team, Luka?
So this might come to a surprise. I mean, it's definitely going to come to a surprise as one of the individuals who see it in our YouTube chat. I feel like a lot of individuals would probably slot in the Jags here. I'm going to slot in the Ravens. And I think there's one thing that people are just really sleeping on. I don't think they've been at their absolute best. And yet, if you look in the AFC, they are the only team to still not even allow 100 points on the season. They are 5-2. They're winning ugly games a lot. I think the Indianapolis loss in overtime kind of stands out to people in their head. And it's just like they're a very impressive team. They have 171 points for, which I'm just looking through it real quick, I believe puts them in the top 5-6 in the AFC. But again, their defense is actually stepping up huge lately. They're a very well-run team. They're a very dangerous team. And I think the passing game is just starting to get going right now. It's a scary team in my mind that I honestly slide them above the Jags and put them in that next best spot.
So it's funny. If you had asked me this a week ago, I would have told you the Ravens are fool's gold. They have had, in my opinion, the luckiest run on the schedule of any team in the league. They played CJ Stroud, his first game as an NFL pro. He's been fantastic, but his first game was on the road in Baltimore. They played the Bengals week 2 when Joe Burrow was very much not healthy. Got a win there. They got to play Gardner Minshew because Anthony Richardson was out. They got to play PJ Walker because Deshaun Watson was out. And then, they played Tennessee and they played Pittsburgh, and, they have 1, 2, 3, 4 wins to show for that. And that's like, okay, that's not that tough of a schedule. And then last week happened, Luka, and one of the teams I have the most respect for in the league to this point is the Detroit Lions. And the Ravens smacked them up and down the field last week. That caught my attention. I am not willing to fight you on them right now. I still question the weapons. I really do. Lamar is the ultimate X factor. He looks really good. And I think their defense is rounding into form. I'm good with Baltimore being 3. And who is your number 4?
Number 4 is the Jags. The Jags are a very good team. They're hot right now, to be honest. Like, the offense is really moving. Trevor Lawrence looks good. There's a lot of great things about the Jags. I will say this. They have a very interesting game this upcoming weekend. I remember looking at the card and just thinking at Pittsburgh as I believe right now a 2-point favorite. It's a 1:00 game. I don't think the weather's going to be good. I think this is going to be more of a test for them than some might believe, because of course the Pittsburgh defense is good, but overall, I think this is a very, very good week to understand where they truly are. And I believe they deserve to be in this 4 spot, if I'm counting this right.
So we've named 4 teams. None of them have been the Buffalo Bills so far. Are the Bills 5, or do you have another team you want to slide in before them?
That is where I was finally trying to figure this out. I think the Steelers are the fakest 4-2 team in the league. It blows my mind still right now that they're 4-2. I don't get it. I will say this. If Deshaun Watson was healthy, I think I would put the Browns above here. Because it's impressive what they're doing with a PJ Walker. They're still able to run the ball very well. And then that defense, even though it kind of allowed a bunch to Gardner Minshew last week, is still a very impressive defense. And Myles Garrett quite literally won that game on his own. But I think this is where I draw the line, and I will put the Bills at 5 right now. But I think the gap between them and the Browns is very, very thin.
It's funny. The team you didn't mention is the one that I would challenge most is the Bengals. I think that as Joe Burrow continues to get healthy, now we have to see what happens with T. Higgins. Can he get back right? I think the Bengals are going to have a lot to say about this AFC. This Bills-Bengals game coming up on Sunday night next week is fascinating. But boy, do the Bengals have a tall test before they see the Bills, particularly if Brock Purdy plays. Then maybe they're catching the Niners at the right time with a bunch of their studs down, but they got to play the Niners before coming back for the Bills. I think we'll know a lot about the AFC after these next 2 weeks. For now, I will agree with you and put the Bills here. I would put the Bengals next, but we both agree the Bills are 5th. That's tough because, before the season started, we probably would have put them as high as 2, maybe even 1 after the Miami game. And, it's October 27th, folks. They don't hand out trophies on October 27th. It's just collect as many wins as you can and hope you're rounding into shape when the big games hit. But Luka, it is now time for your favorite segment of the week, a segment where we can kind of spin it around the league, hopefully make some people rich. If you listened to us about our single game parlay last night, you would have won some nice change on a plus 500 odds of Dalton Kincaid anytime touchdown, Josh Allen over 275 yards. So Luka, let's continue the winning streak. Luka's Locks has had a rough start to the season, 7 of 14, but that just means that we are due. And the first lock of the week is going to take us to a matchup of very young, exciting quarterbacks. Now, one of them has had a little bit rough start to his career. That's Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers. They are going to be taking on C.J. Stroud and the Houston Texans. C.J. Stroud has been fantastic. Sounds like no Robert Woods this week. Carolina's been a mess. Frank Reich loses offensive play calling. How do you see this game going for your first game of the week 8 locks?
Yeah, no, first and foremost, I mean, just the last 2 weeks alone, we are as cold can be. And last night, having that little mini parlay at plus 500 still ridiculous in my mind. I can't believe that was plus 500. Incredible. We're trying to turn the tide here. So, yeah, we find ourselves in Carolina. And honestly, it's an interesting one because Frank Reich has handed over play calling duty over to his offensive coordinator. He is eliminating that, and that would, I believe, in some people's eyes, be viewed as a benefit. And then on top of it all, they're coming off a bye. They probably can rework some things. But Houston's also coming off a bye. It's one of those rare games where both teams are coming off a bye and then playing each other. And I think C.J. Stroud right now is playing at an unbelievable level. I think the Texans defense has been a little disappointing of late, but has shown that they can be effective. And just the Carolina offense has shown me absolutely nothing for me to believe in anything at all. The line is currently at 3.5 Texans, I believe, everywhere. I'm going to buy that half point where possible or the full point. That's the asterisk in FanDuel. If you did there, it's 2.5. Do not get caught by the 3.5 hook there. Buy it to 3 to even open up the push. It's perfectly okay, but I like the Texans. Give me that. I think they can win this game. Kind of we'll call it a 26-20, maybe even like a 26-17. I think is ultimately where I think this game goes. But overall, I just don't see how the Texans don't at least cover 3 points.
The thing about sports gambling, Luka, is you don't just have to bet on point spreads and favorites and over-unders. There are now a wide variety of things you can bet on. Last night, our parlay included a Dalton Kincaid anytime touchdown. And that is the kind of metric you're going to go with your second lock of the week is you have a player that you feel very confident is going to find the end zone this week. Who is that player?
So we're going to talk about Breece Hall here, and I'm just going to throw the graphic up immediately. I love Breece Hall in this Battle of the Meadowlands matchup. It was interesting, and this is kind of that pick where it's like I was looking for that one change of pace thing, try to get rid of this cold streak as we see right there. We're trying to get that right, and I was looking up some stuff, and somehow the Giants, a team the Bills struggled to move the ball on 2 weeks ago, allow 5 yards per carry and have allowed a tied for second rushing touchdowns with 10. They love to give up chunks on the ground. They give up scores on the ground. And I think Breece Hall is just getting healthier by the week. He looks great with the Jets. They're coming off a bye week as well. This is one that I think and it would expect to hit early. I feel like you see a lot of running back scores early. That's just generally like in the orchestrated drive. You get down inside the 10. All of a sudden, you got a couple good run plays you like. You execute it well. You get that score. I like Breece Hall to score this week. You can get it at plus money, of course, as you see there. Like a lot of anytime touchdowns are. So give me Breece Hall anytime touchdown against the Giants.
Breece Hall anytime touchdown is number 2. Texans -3 is number 1. And for your third game of the week, we are going to talk about a big NFC matchup this week as the Dallas Cowboys are 6.5-point favorites over the Los Angeles Rams. That could be a sneaky good game of the week as far as two teams fighting for positioning in the NFC. Luka, how do you see this one going down?
So this is one of those ones I might have even highlighted to earlier in the episode where I think it really does depend on how you feel about the Cowboys. And I think the Cowboys this year have shown that they can absolutely dominate bad teams and they can absolutely manhandle you at the line of scrimmage, create chaos, get ahead early, and everything like that. The interesting part to me is I don't think the Rams can be manhandled, at least early on. I think they have a lot of aerial threat. You've seen it with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp looks great. He looks to his old self. Puka Nacua is he might be, a top 5, top 3 wide receiver 2 in the league already at this point in time. He is just incredible. And when you have those kinds of things and then the mind of a Sean McVay to orchestrate and exploit the weaknesses that I think Dallas does have in their secondary, mainly due to the injury that they're still kind of dealing with Trayvon Diggs being out for the rest of the year, there's stuff to be had there. And I think we've even seen Micah Parsons kind of cool off just a little bit where there might be some fun to be had with this Rams team. I think they can keep it close and everything like that. I think 6.5 points is just way too much to be given to the Cowboys. It's too much respect in my mind to the Cowboys. I think this is a field goal game at best. I think you're giving them an extra 3.5 points just because they're at home for whatever reason. I think the money also, just for what it's worth, is heavily on the Cowboys. I think everyone saw Pittsburgh, who is not a respected 4-2 team, come into LA and beat the Rams, and that's what everyone sees. The Rams gave away that game. I think they're a better team than that. I don't think they're a great team, but they're definitely better than being a 6.5-point dog in Dallas, who is not an impressive team in my mind. So with that in mind, give me the Rams plus 6.5.
Yeah, it's funny. I think Dallas has a better roster, almost undoubtedly, but this is, to me, this is a coaching mismatch. Sean McVay against Mike McCarthy, and I honestly would take Matt Stafford over Dak Prescott at this point. So I love the weapons in LA. I do think that Nacua and Kupp are better weapons than CeeDee Lamb and Cooks. Cooks has been good though, so I might want to walk that back a little bit. But I think the combination of Nacua and Kupp, the way they get open, the rapport they have with Stafford, it's a fun offense to watch. They're a pain. I like that pick by you quite a bit. That line feels heavy to me, so I would certainly want to get in on that. All right, Luka. Well, a stress-free Sunday coming up for all of us Bills fans, as we don't have to worry about whether or not the Bills are going to win. They have certainly already taken care of business this week. There is a full slate of NFL games coming up this weekend. Is there one particular game that catches your eye, whether it's from a Bills standpoint or just in general on this NFL weekend?
I will say this. I think in a weird way, I think Saints at Colts is just going to be a fun watch, sneaky good watch. I think Jags at Pittsburgh, I mentioned it before, a true test in my mind for the Jags just because Pittsburgh is a respected defense on top of, I don't think it's going to be great conditions if I looked at it correctly. So that's going to be an interesting one to see truly where the Jags are currently as they are doing really well at this point in time. that is definitely Bills centered. And then one more game that is just I don't know what to expect. It's going to be interesting is Vikings at Packers. This does not relate to the Bills at all. It just relates to the scope of the NFL. I think the Vikings on Monday night beating the Niners outright was a massive thing for them. And the Packers are as low as they've been in my lifetime, to be quite honest. It feels like it's just one of those games where I think in the betting world, for instance, everyone's like, you have to take the Vikings. I think right now, let me double check this. Yeah, the Vikings are only a 1.5, 2-point favorite. And you're like, how is that possible and stuff? And it's just one of those games where it's like, well, you have to take the Packers. Like, you'd be stupid not to take the Packers because everything tells you it's supposed to be the Vikings, but it can't. Like, it just can't be that way. So that's going to be one of those games where I'm very curious to see the outcome. I didn't want to touch that thing with a 20-foot pole when it comes to betting, but I'm very intrigued to see how that game all break down.
Couple that stand out to me anytime the Miami Dolphins play, I'm going to be curious about it. I do not expect the New England Patriots to give them much of a fight this week in Miami, but we shall see. I'll always be rooting against the Dolphins. Jag Steelers, you already mentioned it. I would love to see the Jaguars or Steelers put up a fight there, but I will be locked into in the 4:00 games, 4:25 Bengals at Niners, particularly if Brock Purdy plays. There's been signs that the Bengals are rounding back into form, that AFC Championship game form they saw last year. Joe Burrow, I think, has been looking better and better as the weeks have gone on. They did survive Seattle at home, which was a little bit weird. So I think if they go to San Francisco and they punch with the Niners, it might turn my opinion about where I rank the Bills and the Bengals. Luckily, my opinion doesn't matter much beyond the next week and a half because these two teams will settle it on the field. I would very much like to see the Niners outclass the Bengals. It would make me feel a lot better about not only the game next week, but where the Bills stack up in the landscape of the AFC. Luka, it is what, like 4 a.m. where you're at now?
No, I believe it's 2 a.m. Although it's funny because I'm using a VPN, so it says it's 9 p.m. right now on my laptop. But no, it's 2 a.m. right now. Matt served me right.
All right. Well, we will let you go to bed so you can enjoy another day of touristing tomorrow. And Luka and I will be back next week as we will be getting ever so much closer to that big Bengals-Bills matchup coming up next week. But enjoy the football weekend. The Bills have already won. It's a stress-free football weekend. Happy Halloween to everybody out there. For Luka, I am Josh McCarty. We will see you next week on Bills Chat Live.